Hello, friends. From the beginning of time, people believed in strange creatures which supposedly lived on our planet. Moreover, these creatures were different in each country. It was dragons, wyverns, and unicorns in Europe, and minotaurs, pawn, and other demigods in Greece. There's a whole bunch of other small fictional, or maybe real creatures, which our ancestors used to believe in for centuries. So what creatures have people believed in for centuries? Let's find out. It's virtually impossible to find a person who has no idea what a unicorn looks like. Even young children know perfectly well that unicorns are horses with one horn sticking out of their foreheads. The first images of these unusual creatures were found in India over 4,000 years ago. Legends of Western Asia with their descriptions of the unicorns followed the Indian people, and then Greece and Rome did as well. In the 5th century BC, unicorns were also described in the West. What's most surprising is that in ancient times, these creatures were considered to be quite real, and all the myths were passed off as stories that actually happened to people. Of all of the animals that did exist in the world, Elasmotherium most resembles a unicorn. These animals lived in the steppes of Eurasia and looked similar to our modern-day rhinoceros. Their habitat used to be slightly south of that of the woolly rhinos. It was during the Ice Age, at the same time when the first rock carvings of Elasmotherium were recorded. These animals look similar to our horses, but the Elasmotheriums had a long horn on their forehead. They disappeared at the same time as the rest of the inhabitants of the megafauna of Eurasia. However, some scientists still believe that Elasmotherium managed to survive and live for a long time after that. It was about them who were featured in the legends about black bulls with a large horn on their forehead. There are many folk stories featuring different kinds of dragons. The image of these mythical creatures was different in each culture. For example, in Europe, dragons were described as large creatures living in the mountains and breathing fire. This is the description that most people see as classic. In China, however, these animals were described in a completely different way and looked more like huge snakes. In most legends, dragons represented a serious obstacle that a hero needed to overcome in order to receive a generous reward. Dragons were most probably featured in myths because of the remains of dinosaurs, which might have been found and were probably mistaken for the bones of the mythical creatures. Of course, legends about dragons didn't just appear out of nowhere. The animals that these myths are based on did actually live at one point. The largest terrestrial lizards known to science were called megalania. They lived in the Pleistocene epoch in Australia. The megalania fed exclusively on mammals, and the size of the prey didn't matter. Their habitat was low-density forest and grassy savannas. It's believed that some types of megalania managed to live up to the time when the ancient people appeared. That's where the images of huge lizards came from. The length of these lizards could reach up to 9 meters, and they weighed up to 2,500 kilograms. The ancient Icelandic sailors have described terrible monsters that resembled cephalopods. It was these sailors that told most of the stories about a monster called the Kraken. The first mention of this creature was recorded by a naturalist from Denmark. According to his descriptions, the animal was the size of a floating island, and it was so strong that it could pull the largest warship to the bottom with its tentacles. The sailors were also afraid of the eddies created by the Kraken's sudden dive. Many scientists today are convinced that the Kraken still exists. They're just called big squids now, and there isn't anything mythical about them. There's also evidence from many fishermen that these creatures still exist. The only disputes are about its size. Just recently, scientists have found a giant squid in the southern seas. Its size was about 14 meters. It's also said that this creature might have pointed claws at the ends of its tentacles, in addition to its usual suckers, meaning such a monster could frighten even someone living in our time, let alone the medieval fishermen, who would consider a large squid to be a giant mythical creature in any case. Tales about centaurs came to us from ancient Greece. Centaurs were described as having a horse-like body, but with a human torso and head. It is also mentioned that centaurs are mortal like ordinary people. They could only be seen in the thicket of the forest or high in the mountains. Ordinary people feared these creatures, as it was believed that centaurs were violent and unrestrained. There are many descriptions of centaurs in mythology. They say that some centaurs shared their wisdom and experience with humans, teaching and mentoring them, while others were hostile and were always at war with ordinary people. People of the nomadic tribes that lived in the north are believed to be responsible for inventing these creatures. Despite the fact that civilization had already existed at the time, the people have learned to ride horses. Thus, the first mention of centaurs are attributed to the Scythians, Taurinians, and Kassites. These tribes lived off of cattle breeding and raised fierce and huge bulls, on which the centaur's temper was based. Griffins have been described as having the body of a lion and an eagle's head. These creatures also had huge wings, big claws, and a lion's tail. In some cases, the griffin's wings were golden in color, while in other tales they were snow white. The first mentions of these mythical creatures also come from ancient Greece. It is believed that it was the Altai Scythians who told the Greeks about these mythical creatures when they were looking for gold in the Gobi Desert. Wandering through the sandy expanses, these people accidentally found the remains of Protoceratops and took him for a mythical creature. Scientists of our day have found that the griffin's description is almost identical to this kind of dinosaur. For example, the remains were the right size and had a beak. In addition, the Protoceratops had a horny growth on the back of its head, which could have decayed over time and began to look like ears and wings. This is when griffins began to be featured in all kinds of myths and legends. Yeti has many different names. In some places, this creature is known as Yeti, in others as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The descriptions, however, point to the fact that it's the same Yeti everywhere. It's described as a creature that looks like a person, only larger. It's completely covered with fur and lives only in the mountains or thickets of forests. There's no scientific evidence for the existence of these creatures, but there are still legends, even in our time, about Yeti wandering the forests. People who talk about their encounters with the Yeti claim that these creatures have a muscular body, a pointed skull, disproportionately long arms, a short neck, and a heavy, protruding lower jaw. The color of its coat is described in different ways. Some saw it as red, others as white or black. There have even been descriptions of Yeti with gray hair. There's still debate among scientists about what species Yeti can be attributed to. One of the plausible assumptions is that this creature is a mammal related to humans and primates. It appeared in the prehistoric period and somehow managed to survive. There's also an opinion that Yeti is from another planet, extraterrestrial that is. Today, the prevailing opinion is that Yeti is none other than a kind of Gigantopithecus. These animals were humanoid apes whose height could reach up to 4 meters. Even by this dragon's name, one can understand that it comes from Korea. So the creature was endowed with features characteristic of this particular country. The Korean dragon was a serpentine creature with no wings, but with a large and long beard. Despite the fact that in most countries these animals were described as fire-breathing creatures that destroy everything in their path, Korean dragons were peaceful creatures. They were protecting rice fields and water. It was also believed in Korea that their mythical dragon could also make rain. The existence of this amazing creature is confirmed by science. In the not-so-distant past, scientists managed to find the remains of a huge snake. This creature lived on Earth from 61.7 to 58.7 million years BC and was given the name Titanoboa. The size of this snake was truly impressive. An adult snake was about 13 meters long and weighed more than 1 ton. And that's it for today, friends. Like our video and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time.